Welcome to a football show, Monday edition. Not a Victory Monday, but damn it, it was close. His name is Zach Lyons. My name is Braden Gall. Welcome to the show. Jump into the comments, please. If you are watching on Twitter or Facebook, that's great. But on YouTube, you can actually interact, ask questions, and yes, usually make us both either laugh or look stupid. We do appreciate you guys, mostly just me on that
I haven't
last
seen
one there.
anybody make us look stupid yet in the chat, and we've been doing this for about a year and a half. So I guess you guys need to amp up your game.
And that's true. Step up your game, Sewer. Come on, Sewer. No, we do appreciate you guys jumping into the comments. Jump over to the 440 Sports YouTube page. Give us a subscription. Head over to stackintheinbox.com. Give you a subscription, of course. We've got a wild and crazy SEC championship game and college football playoff to discuss later on today in the show. And you and I were discussing the product in terms of the trust of the power structure, trust in Mike Vrabel, trust in Rand Carthon, trust in Amy Adams-Strunk, trust in some of the leaders. And we were going to have a little bit of a conversation about that. I think those questions have been answered just prior to the show with the firing of special teams coordinator Craig Aukerman. So we'll get to that and a ton to react to, of course, from the loss to the Colts in what I can only say is the weirdest football game I have ever seen played at Nissan Stadium. I'm sure there's other ones that are close, but it is among one of the craziest.
The Lions Titans game was way crazier and way more improbable of the things that happened in that game than this game. And that was played at Nissan Stadium. Maybe you left the game early like 75% of the people did, but I mean, that to me was one of the, and maybe because I experienced it, but I felt like I experienced it yesterday because it was wild. I wouldn't really argue with it. I just think that that one has to be, for me, number one, but I could see that being flipped around to the other one.
And I wouldn't argue with anybody on any of that. I just think the statistical probability of some of the things that took place on Sunday in the Titans loss and overtime to the Colts are just extremely, extremely low. So we'll get to a lot of that stuff, what we thought of Will Levis, the receiving core, the offensive line, the secondary, a lot of that stuff. But again, as I mentioned, we're going to start with Craig Aukerman being relieved of his duties, but we are brought to you, of course, by Sinkers Beverages. You know, I was hanging out with some friends in the neighborhood, and some of our kids were playing together on Saturday, watching the SEC championship game, and we ran out of beverages. Right, we all walk home, so let's just be clear about this. We all walk back to our houses at the end of the evening, but we kind of ran out of beverages, and my buddy decides to just order using this other company. I'm not going to use the name. I mean, I'm sure it's a fine company, but they use this other company that delivers drinks. And I was like, well, wait a second. You can just use Uber Eats and search Sinkers Beverages and just have it delivered directly to your door. And he
drink?
Yeah, exactly. And he was kind of like, really? I was like, yes, we've been telling people for over almost a year now that you can, in fact, have the booze delivered directly to your door. So if you're in the middle of that halftime game against the Titans and you have no idea what the hell you're watching, make sure you search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages, and have the two-time defending champion deliver you booze. That's all I got to say. Just make sure you do that. So it's Sinkers Beverages. And, of course, their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages, up in Hendersonville, proud title sponsor of Football and Other F Words, which I'm assuming will be entertaining this week. Also, Kingston Group, Build KG. BuildKG.com is the website. You guys know the drill with them. They are experts on home building, home renovations, home selling, home buying. They are experts on homes, especially in Nashville, a very strange home market. Use them to your advantage. My family uses them to do additions to our house. We have used them to help us find other people that can help us with problems with our house. They are a full-service employer here, locally owned and operated, award-winning. So make sure you check them out, buildkg.com. So Kingston Group and Sinkers Beverages, there you go. We already have somebody voting with you, by the way, Team Ramrod, which is just a fantastic reference. If you know, you know. That Lions-Titans game is the wildest football game I've ever seen, and no one ever talks about it because it's the Titans and the Lions.
To be fair, me and Stoney almost spent an entire podcast talking about that game and talking about Jake Locker. Go and subscribe to the Unofficial Titans podcast and go listen there for a Jake Locker centric episode that talked a lot about that game.
I think you and Stoney could do some sort of weird series of episodes, call it the Dead Gladiators or something, about former Titans and former Titans games that just need to be relived in very weird and strange ways, good and bad and otherwise. So we'll get to all the weird oddities of yesterday, but at the top of the list, of course, are back-to-back block punts in which Ryan Stonehouse dies 2 separate times. It's hard to die twice in a single football game, but Ryan Stonehouse did. It actually turns out he's out for the year now. He's going to require surgery. Left the building on crutches yesterday, and obviously is going to be missed. The missed extra point with Ryan Tannehill as the holder. Even the opening kickoff to the Colts, the Titans' first kickoff was like a 40-yard return. And this on the top of 5 years of just very strange decision-making. I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, Zach, was why we still have faith in the decision-making and the culture and Mike Vrabel and the leadership group of this Tennessee Titans organization. And I think one of the things that fully cements why I believe that there is still plenty of faith in all those people, not the least of which is Rand Carthon's rookie class playing very well. That Amy Adams-Strunk, I think, is still deserving of high praise by and large. Mike Vrabel is still in control of the team in the locker room, but more importantly, sort of willing to do something different this time when it called for it, and firing a guy he's been loyal to for a very long time, and Craig Aukerman gone as the special teams coordinator for the Tennessee Titans.
I mean, for me, this doesn't even rank in that category for me, because I'm more surprised that he actually did it. Not that I feel like it needed to be done right now. I mean, you could have waited. I mean, what's a special teams coach anyway? And I just felt he could have waited. And if we're specifically talking about Craig Aukerman separately, the situation separately, I listen. You guys know me. Ever since I've been doing football and other F words, and Craig Aukerman has somehow waded through his 2018 season, I have been a proponent that Craig Aukerman should not have a job. And I've been doing this thing that I'm working on, this little new stat for everybody. It's called the buddy stat. And it's how many coaches on staff are considered buddies, right? In-house hires or hires that you have relationships with and all that kind of stuff. And when Craig Aukerman got fired, and people in the group chat know that I'm talking about this, they go, well, I don't know if you can really say that Vrabel hired his buddy when he hired Craig Aukerman. That's kind of true, because he was a holdover. There's no ties between Craig Aukerman. He was a holdover from the Malarkey era, but he was promoted. And on top of that, I think after a certain point of subpar coordinating, you become a buddy. 6 years, or 5.5, if you want to call this half a year, was absolutely way too long for Craig Aukerman. So they became buddies. So he definitely counts towards the buddy rating system. So in my mind, I am very surprised, because also, like, firing a coach mid-season is not typically something he has ever done. But I thought his words today spoke a lot. And he said, it's what's best. It's what's needed when it comes to those kinds of decisions, those kinds of moves. That's what he says. So it's like, it's what's best and what's needed. So keeping coaches in season that maybe should have been fired, Todd Downing, it was what's best and what's needed at the time. It's about timing and feel, and this was what's best and what's needed, and that tells you a lot, because let's be honest, we know Mike Vrabel is a big relationship guy when it comes to establishing relationships, getting to know players, getting to know staff members. I'm sure this was not a very easy decision from an emotional standpoint, but I also think that, like, when you see your punter on crutches knowing that he's going to be out, I think it's pretty easy after that. And and to me, yesterday, you can say some of it is on the players. I think, Josh Wiley, Luke Gifford, both those guys that, messed up. Ryan Tannehill messed up. But again, it's the coordinator's job to have your guys prepared. After the first blocked punt where your punter gets murdered, why are your guys not prepared?
Yeah. Well, the gunner, the gunner was sort of prepared. He pointed and said, hey, look at that guy. And then nobody paid attention, which that's on the coach. That's on the coach. Like, you clear, like, I've never heard of
Ryan Tannehill ready. That's on the coach.
I've never heard, and this is how my brain thought about it, because offensive coordinators stack plays, right? Like, you're going to run. I think the Packers did a brilliant job of it on Sunday night, where they're running that jet sweep, fake motion, and then it's a real one, right? And then so they're stacking the plays off of each other. I've never seen a punt block get stacked. I've never seen a coordinator stack his punt blocks, because that's what he did. On the first one, they blow up kind of like off the edge, but in the middle and kind of inside the tackle box, and just destroy Stonehouse, and they end up scoring a touchdown. Well, then he went a completely different route because he assumed the Titans were going to solidify the interior, which they did, and didn't pay attention at all to the gunner sliding in and coming off the edge. And so that's on the coach. Like that's on the coach. And so
Amani Hooker said it best. They just did a good job of coaching up whatever we had.
Yeah.
The gunner came off the ball. They did a good job of timing it up just off the edge. Everyone was doing their jobs. It was a good job on their part and their coaching. That's straight from Podkarski.com article about all of this. And I this has been the question of the day, is like, who made the call? Oh, I don't care who made the call. Craig Aukerman's gone. Well, and listen, Vrabel would have made the call. Let's say that he was forced to do it in midseason. I don't think he would have put up much of a fight, because he's probably doing it at the end of the season anyway. But also, one of the best players and most consistent players is on crutches, and it's due to coordinating, and it's something that the Tennessee, and that's Mike Vrabel's big on player side, players' health, and all this stuff. I think it's a Vrabel decision, but I really just don't give a shit. I don't give a shit to parse that out. He is gone. That's all that matters.
I tend to agree with you, and Ed and Green Thumb, you both have kind of asked that. I just don't.
And there were people on my replies on my X and everything. So
I don't see at all how a general manager or owner can force the hand of a coach for a special teams coordinator. Like, it just doesn't. That's a Mike Vrabel decision, in my opinion. And I think this is also, to your point, I don't care if he was technically hired or a holdover or brought out. Like, we know how he likes to operate, which is to develop from within. And he's loyal to a fault to players and coaches, which is totally normal for most football coaches. And this is a long time coming for this. So it's not like we don't need to rehash like why this is happening necessarily. I think you've been on this for like 3 years now, maybe longer. And I think like let's just again, coverage yesterday wasn't very good either, and that's lost in the shuffle of like the major mistakes. But how about the Kyle Phillips punt drop against the Ravens? Like, that, it's Kyle Phillips' fault that he didn't catch the punt. That's his fault. It is the coach's fault that he doesn't know when to catch the punt or not. And so the coach has to coach that out of Kyle Phillips. And the returner problem has been a problem. Coverage has been a problem. Finding a field goal kicker, I think some of that's on Vrabel and their hubris. They finally decided to send a draft pick for a kicker, and guess what? It's worked out. Also turns out to be a halfway decent punter as well. So I think, to me, there's just a long list of things. Does it change the team next year? Does it make them a 12-win team instead of a 10-win team, or a 11-win team instead of a 8-win team?
I mean, it may, maybe. With how they lost yesterday because of special teams, and they have lost games before because of special teams. So
to the Colts.
I mean, maybe not a 12-win team, but there could be like 2 or 3, different games. Maybe not this year. Maybe this is the only year that special teams would have affected, but it doesn't mean that it can't come quickly for a team like this. And, I look at it like this, he was never good. Even dating back to the his days with the, I think they were still the San Diego Chargers back in 2016, but even as special teams coordinator, he was never good. Well, and any time that he ranked high, like last year's, when you have All-Pro Ryan Stonehouse, and this year he was trending in a good direction because you have Nick Folk not missing kicks, and you have All-Pro Ryan Stonehouse. So like, now you don't have Ryan Stonehouse. How good was the special teams unit going to be? Probably not that good. My thing is he just never had an answer.
Yeah.
There was never an answer in the press conference that he gave that was like, made me be like, okay, well, now I understand what's happening. No, he just was a guy that was in over his head, and he was in over his head for 5.5 years. And, maybe he's just a good special teams assistant, and that's what he is. And there's nothing wrong with being that guy, but this is not a special teams coordinator.
Tom Quinn, of course, will take over as the special teams coordinator for this team. They always say like that the sort of the historical cliche is always like, well, it's the 3 phases of the game. It's 3 equal parts. And I've always been like, that's so stupid. It's like 45% offense, 45% defense, 10% special teams.
Well, it should be. The Tennessee Titans don't make it that way.
But so here's how I would look at that. I would say the vast majority of football game outcomes in the NFL don't hinge on special teams. But when they do, it can be incredibly important. And especially when games are very close as you get into the playoffs or into divisional deciding championship caliber type of matchups. When you get into very close games, the margins get smaller. And I think that's where all of a sudden your special teams being really, and I would say the vast majority of special teams are probably similar, but that's where you get into the very, very good special teams might be worth a couple of wins a year. And the very bad special teams might be worth a couple of losses each year. So I think it's more like a 40-40-20 or a 45-45-10. But when they are important, man, is the impact magnified. And it normally happens in close games.
Let's talk about coordination real quick. Not just about the coordination on the punting, but your job as a coordinator should be, listen, you've been with the Tennessee Titans since 2017. You have seen some of the craziest statistical seasons with injuries in the NFL in your time as special teams coordinator. When Ryan Stonehouse went down, I believe got carted back to the locker room. I'm not for 100% on that, but when he's heading back to the locker room and he's taken out, your job is to be over there with Ryan Tannehill and Nick Folk and hammering out everything before they actually have to go out there and kick a field goal. And which, by the way, and this falls onto Mike Vrabel, if you have a new holder who did not do any of that because your special teams coordinator is not good at his job, you should be going for 2. You should not be going and kicking a field goal. And they lost and had to go into overtime because they missed that field goal, because they weren't over there. He was not coordinating. He was not over there managing players, making sure that they were ready, making sure that Ryan Tannehill said, Ryan, got to get you over here, bud, because he should be like, Ryan, I know I didn't prepare you at all as part of my job this whole offseason and at practices while you became a backup. I could have spent time preparing you for this because we are supposed to be ready for everything, but not the special teams. And I'm going to make sure, though, that you are ready, that you and Nick Folk are on the same page. Instead, he tilts it the wrong way, puts the laces the wrong way. It's in the right spot, but you can see at the very end that he tilted it in a weird direction.
Yeah, it went towards
then
him.
After him and Nick Folk are showing each other everything and going over everything. Where's Craig Aukerman? He wasn't even over there for that. It was some other coach was over there for that. So I can't feel bad for him. I mean, I feel bad that someone lost their job, but it's hard for me to feel bad for someone that was bad at their job that lost their job.
It's the nature of the game, and they get paid very highly to coach a sport. So I'm not in the grand scheme of the world. My bleeding heart does not ever go out to fired coaches or players. So players maybe more so because their physical toll on their body. All right, we've got some college football craziness to get to, but I want to discuss the craziness that happened at Nissan Stadium just in general, and then I want to get your thoughts on some specific players as well. Seekers Beverages Kingston Group is who brings us this great show. So brings you this great show, so please support them. Search Uber Eats, search Seekers Beverages, have the booze delivered directly to your house.
They drive so you can drink.
Kingston Group, buildkg.com is the website. So just quickly here, okay? Gave up a double-digit lead, back-to-back block punts, 4 injuries to arguably the 2 most important players on the team. Jeffrey Simmons, knee injury, the update on him is a couple of weeks, but not super serious, so that's good and bad, but probably better. Not the knee he tore the ACL pre-draft. Derrick Henry also left the game with concussion protocol, is not in the protocol today, which is also good news. It means he's probably playing next week.
I don't think he got into the protocol yesterday either, from what it sounded like. So he was never in protocol, but Schefter said he was. So, but Schefter's been wrong before about Derrick Henry stuff, so I'm not surprised.
Ryan Stonehouse, of course, as we've said, out for the season. Josh Wiley left at around the same time as Derrick Henry with the knee injury. It appears that it is not extremely serious, so who knows about that? We'll keep an eye on that. And then, of course, Christian Fulton left the game at the end of the game. Not sure I noticed him during the course of the game. Not sure I noticed anybody in the secondary. Maybe not. We'll get to the secondary in a second because that was bad. With a hamstring injury that keeps, and I think the way Vrabel said it is it's that. I can see
damn hamstring.
He's like, that damn hamstring keeps acting up, and it's those
all
soft
that
tissue.
Pilates and hot yoga and shit didn't really do much.
A pick 2, which the CBS broadcast totally screwed up, by the way, putting a touchdown on the board. And I was like, that was I walked out of the room. I came back and I was like, you can't have those two things happen back to back, a block punt for a touchdown. So a pick two, off a deflection too, by the way, not even just a regular old like, hey, you threw the out route slow and the guy broke on it well and took it the distance. No, like off somebody's face into Hooker's hands and then all the way down. The missed extra point, as we've already alluded to. Will, and one of my main points about Will Levis is going to be ball security. We'll talk about that in a second. But I took a 3-pointer knowing full well that it was going to clank off the front of the iron, and I ran full speed to go get the rebound to knock the interception out of the guy's hands and then recover the fumble. Also, something I've never seen, maybe in like all of football ever. You had Tajay Spears knocking it, what would have been a fumble, down into the ground. Chig recovering it, goes back. They have to call timeout. I mean, just Colts are tackling each other. You got Levis and Hopkins getting into it on the sidelines. Like I was ready to say this feels like a game that has permanently broken this team this year, not long term, but just for this season. That this is the thing we're going to look back on and be like, Stonehouse out, Simmons out, the fan base. I don't know. And then your piece comes out, which is there such thing as a good loss? And I want you to kind of take us through your perception on that, because I think this is the moment we're going to look back on this season and go, oh, that's where it kind of ended. And I think there's a chance that they only win a game or two the rest of the way, if that. And I think there's a moral, mental, psychological breaking that took place along with Ryan Stonehouse's plant leg on Sunday, potentially.
I would
about
disagree with the moral and mental aspect of it.
Morale, by the way, not moral.
Yeah. Oh, morale. But I mean,
like
to me, it doesn't. I think you're wrong on that, and I talk about it in my piece. But the message all week was go out there and fight from Vrabel, because what we've talked about leading up into these games, dating back to last week or last year, during that really bad losing streak, we've talked about the team doesn't look like it has any fight in it. It doesn't look like is Vrabel's message wearing thin, or people ignoring Vrabel? Is Vrabel still got control of the locker room, et cetera, et cetera? Yesterday's game answered everything. They had fight from start to finish, all the way into overtime. They fought. They had players flying around. They had players, with energy. They had players that were hard to tackle. They had players that were delivering some massive tackles. They had everything you wanted to see in a Titans game that you have not seen from all three, from the offense and defense, your main two phases, that you have not seen all year. I think this was their best fought team. Like, this was the most complete offense and defense that I feel like we've seen all year, even in the wins, because they cared. They fought. That was the message. It's unfortunate that you could kind of tie this into Florida State. It's unfortunate they fought really hard and played really well, but they're still not good enough. And that's just how it is, right? Like, that's just how it is at a certain point. You lose Jeffrey Simmons relatively early in the game. You got the kicks. They still fought even after losing Jeffrey Simmons. They could have laid down and died. They could have laid down and died after 2 blocked punts. They didn't. That lets me know that they are listening to Mike Vrabel and Mike Vrabel's strategy, Mike Vrabel's messaging. Mike Vrabel's grasp of the locker room is as strong as ever. And it's tough, and it's a tough loss. But sometimes in these losses, if you've played sports or maybe part of some kind of competitive team, sometimes in these losses, you see who you can go to battle with. You have found the soldiers that you are willing to go and give it your all, and you can look each other in the eye and said, hey, we gave it our all, on to the next. This team could end up being something totally different than what I'm actually thinking. But that was a good loss yesterday for the fact that you saw a team that actually fought. You saw a team that actually is listening, cares for each other, that is willing to go that extra mile. It just wasn't good enough, and that's okay.
So I agree with all of your analysis of the game itself. I completely agree with everything you wrote in Stacking the Inbox. I completely agree with all of that. My concern, and we'll find out over the course of the next few weeks if my hunch here is wrong or right, and I'm totally willing to be completely wrong on this, no problem at all. What sometimes can happen, and I think is a natural human element, is that when you do that, right, you rally, you fight, you play your ass off. First of all, if you're a Titans fan and you're going to lose games like that, as weird and as bizarre and as painful as it could have been, that was a really entertaining, dramatic football game. No matter what, like, are you angry at the secondary for allowing everyone to get beat deep? Yes. Are you angry at special teams? Yes. Guy's been fired. Like, I understand the anger fans would feel in the moment watching that game, but that was at least an entertaining, dramatic, back and forth, just an exciting football game. Quality aside, an exciting football game. I'm curious because sometimes what you can see is sometimes a loss can beat you more than once in football. It happens more in college. It doesn't happen as much in the NFL. But sometimes a loss can beat you a second time or the next week, and they're going to have to play Miami on Monday night.
So they're going to lose, but it's not going to be because of this game.
What I'm worried about is that sometimes there can be a tipping point in a season where you've been bad. You did rise to the occasion. You did heed the strategy and the culture message from Vrabel, and you did do all of that. And not only was it not good enough, but we lost like our two best players, and like, you see what I'm saying? And it was our arch. Hey, we got up for our arch rival.
It was good. It took 3 fluke plays, right? It took the 2 blocked punts, and it took having to put Ryan Tannehill out there. Other than that, it was good enough. I mean, their good enough was good enough to beat the Colts, but they still lost. So, like, I think that's the message, right? That's the message to keep it going. If you're Mike Vrabel, you say it took 2 damn blocked punts and our backup quarterback going out there and being the holder on a field goal for us to lose this game. You guys did it. You guys fought hard, and we got a tough Monday Night Football matchup. We're going to have an extra day to prepare or an extra day of rest. I don't know how they actually use that, those days and all that kind of stuff heading into Monday Night Football. And nobody expects us to win, but we know that you have brothers and soldiers beside you that are ready to go to war, and we can win this game even though everybody else. That's what good coaches do, and that's what I know Mike Vrabel is doing some form of that. Again, may not be good enough because this is not a good team.
Right.
But that's okay. And I feel like, yeah, it's a bad loss. I mean, I get what you're saying. It can snowball, but I think that snowballing is over. They already know that they snowballed, right? Like, I mean,
they're bad.
Avalanche and all that. So now it's time to rally the troops. And if they had came out and maybe lost the game, but in a different fashion, or maybe even if they lost a close game and the players and the coaches acted differently during the game or played with less effort, yeah, sure. There is no such thing as a good loss. I think the effort to me, it shows it's not really that I think that they're going to win anymore, but I think that you have I think all the players have bought it. It tells more about Mike Vrabel than it does anything else. And it tells more about the young players than it does anything else.
I agree with you. I think for that to stay true, I think I just need to keep seeing it for the rest of the season. I'm not suggesting that they're not. I'd be concerned because the game of football is, I think people think, and I say this about bowl games all the time. It's like, oh, when they say that, like, oh, this team doesn't care. They didn't start their players. Like, they don't care about a bowl game. I'm talking about 5 to 8 to 10% less energy and focus and effort. It's not like a team gives like 5% effort. Like, no. And in the NFL, and Elliott says, I could see some of the vets or dudes on their way out, regardless, taking their foot off the gas. It's the young dudes competing for future spots that I can see still working hard. All very valid and smart points. But the issue in the NFL is you don't have to, like, it could be subconscious that drops you that 4% or that 6% effort. It doesn't mean that you're like loafing or taking time off or not bought into the message. I think
some people can't afford to do that if they want a second contract. There's a lot of people on 1-year contracts.
There's a lot of people on this team that can't afford to take anything off. What I'm saying is there's a natural, when you do buy in like that, and you were like, all right, it's almost like I'm trying to come up with a good analogy. Like, an underdog basketball team in the tournament, like the 12 seed, right, is playing against the 5 seed, and they're down by 15 the entire game, and they rally and they start knocking down shots, and they build 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 and they catch the team, and all of a sudden there's 6 minutes to go and they're down by 2, right? Like you've bought in, you've given everything you've got, the energy and the motion. You're playing your ass off. You're totally bought in. And then like the big Power 5 team just does the one thing because they're better. And all of a sudden, like that breaks you're like, shit, we just busted our asses to get back in this game. And because we're not good enough, that one big play by the other team, and all of a sudden they've got a 12-point win. Does that make sense? Like, does that like?
I just feel like this win you can deliver a different message coming off this loss because of how you lost. And I also think that, listen, this is a wildly inconsistent team, so maybe it does go back to normal because but it's because it's a wildly inconsistent team, devoid of talent, not necessarily because of like they had their morale crushed or anything. And then another reason that's a good loss, just to be honest, is we talked about this last week. We never got around to the subject, but you were talking about you have family that is like, I just really want to watch good games and I want to win and blah, blah, blah. And we watched a really good game and it was a loss.
Yeah.
And that's a good loss because guess what? The Tennessee Titans are within striking distance to get in the top 3. It is not out of the realm of possibility that Tennessee Titans get in the top 3. The NFL released today, and maybe they switched something to the strength of schedule compared to Tankathon. But today, Tennessee Titans are 7. Tankathon has them listed as 8, but in the NFL eyes, they're 7. Yeah. So maybe there's some weird tiebreaker before you get to strength of schedule that goes into the New York Jets. But they can get up to number 3.
Yeah,
it's not an improbability that this team gets up to number 3, and that means you have your choice of 3 blue chip players at a position of need.
If you don't let the way the loss happened on Sunday like ruin your life, like if you don't let that happen in your emotional state, if you don't let that happen, it's a win-win. If you lose, you move up in the draft. If you win, you enjoyed your Sunday even more. And so I think that's very, very complicated. Jets fans understand it, but Titans fans have been very good under Vrabel, so it's harder to understand maybe. So again, all I'm concerned about is that like you buy into the message, you get up, you play your freaking ass off, and it's against your arch rival at home where we're undefeated. And not only do we lose in just atrociously embarrassing, ridiculous, fluky fashion, but we also lost probably our 2 best players for a big chunk of time in Ryan Stonehouse and Jeffrey Simmons. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. If it does happen to the team where they sort of take their foot off the gas or it kind of breaks the season, this season, not long term, but just this season, that's to me sort of human element. I think there's a little bit of human. I could be totally wrong. And Vrabel's message, like you said, is look how close we were. Keep fighting. Look how close we were. Keep fighting. That's never going to happen again. Keep fighting. Are you with me? Let's go to war. Like that, like I get what you're saying, and only time will tell with what this is. So let me ask you about. Can I ask you about a couple of individual players and stuff? Obviously, the secondary was a huge problem. I wanted to get your thought. Like Molden was beat on a touchdown. Fulton was injured and got beat a few times. Sean Murphy-Bunting had probably his worst game. Unfortunately, they put him in on Michael Pittman most of the game. Avery gave up
anything to Molden. That one play by Molden was Christian Fulton's fault. Molden had 3 receivers coming at him, and you could see it on Teron Davenport's. He put up one of those dots. But as soon as Kayvon Wallace went out, that play to Alec Pierce, that was on Christian Fulton.
Jack Gibbons is not a secondary member, of course, but is like the backup tight ends are just torching people down the field for this team. So I wanted to ask you quickly about the secondary, and I think that is outside of the offensive line and the special teams. I think the secondary, like just even some of the guys you believe in have a future with the team next year. And I'm not putting Trey Avery in that category, for example, who was beat on the touchdown for the game winner. It was a tough day for the secondary, for sure.
Yeah, so, Roger McCreary, he was 1 for 5 on targets thrown his way. Kylan Granson was the 46 yards, the 1 catch, big catch. Can't allow that to happen. It was off a trick play, but it is what it is, right? I thought that, the way that they deployed Christian Fulton was, I hated it. It was against what I said, and it came back to bite them in the ass. I mean, the Alec Pierce, right when Kayvon Wallace goes out for a stupid play, stupid penalty. And then they let Alec Pierce go that way. Listen, Sean Murphy Bunting had the worst game as a Tennessee Titan that he's had all year by far, not even close. So maybe he wouldn't have done things differently then, but maybe because he's a little bit more heady and a little bit more sound in his assignments typically, he may have been close just enough for Gardner Minshew not to throw it that way. But to me, Christian Fulton, yet again, when he's on Michael Pittman, 1 for 2 for 14 yards. No touchdowns when he's involved.
Let me ask
I
you,
don't understand why they do not take Christian Fulton. They should have shadowed, and I said it twice, said it on the show, said it in an X that day, that they should put Michael Pittman on there, but they're too stubborn to do it.
Well, let me ask you, do you think that's Chris Harris, Shane Bowen, Mike Vrabel, all the above? Like, who's making that ultimate call? Because we know Vrabel's philosophy.
I would say that it's either Shane Bowen or Mike Vrabel. Like that's a them kind of deal. They could have game planned to do that. I mean, maybe it's also the analytics department for not bringing it forth to them. I don't know, but it's not hard to find and look at tape and all this kind of stuff to know that Michael Pittman and Christian Fulton is a plus matchup for your team where you can practically erase Michael Pittman. Instead, you just let him go wherever he wanted to go, whether it's on Jack Gibbons, Sean Murphy Bunting, Trey Avery. It doesn't matter where it goes. Listen, Christian, this zone defense that they are playing, these guys, and I said it, they have to be sound and disciplined when they pass off in these zone coverages. And they did really good against Josh Downs. They did really poorly against Michael Pittman and Sean and Alec Pierce. So Elijah Molden, fantastic day. Amani Hooker, fantastic day. They had no issues. Kayvon Wallace, fantastic days. Your safeties, if you want to include Elijah Molden in that, played out of their minds. Christian Fulton had a dumb play. Sean Murphy Bunting had a couple different bad plays, and he was just getting abused. And Roger McCreary got abused on a trick play.
And there's also an element of like, hey, just please, for the love of God, just somebody make a play, right? And McCreary dropping the interception, which is not an easy play. That's a hard play, but like it's an opportunity that you miss, one of those kind of things. I wanted to set you up for the why didn't you shadow Christian Fulton with Michael Pittman? That's what I wanted to ask you about there. All right, offensive line. This team, and I want to get to Levis and Spears in just a second, but the offensive line, where are you at on how they played yesterday? I mean, what are they leading the league in false starts? I don't know if that's on Haas, the offensive line coach, if that's on Tim Kelly, Mike Vrabel, but like the penalties are just absolutely killing them. I don't know. Duncan had a couple of nice plays, couple of nice run blocks. He also
I saw people say that he played better this week than last week. No, I want to know what game you were fucking watching.
No, he got.
I even asked, like, when I see X's like that, I'm like, I have to ask someone smarter than me because I felt like on the broadcast he played terribly.
I thought he played terribly. I thought he had a bad day. Now again,
and listen,
Colts defensive line's pretty good.
6th round pick. Yeah, he's a rookie 6th round pick, and there was a lot of stuff that he did do well, but he allowed 9 total pressures, 3 sacks, 1 quarterback hit, and 5 hurries. 9 pressures total. Okay? They allowed, as an offensive line, let me just make sure I'm getting this right. Yes, 22 pressures. 4 sacks, both on the tackles, 3 on Jalen Duncan, 1 on Dylan Radins. The only person... Peter Skronsky allowed 3 hurries. Dylan Radins allowed a sack and 4 hurries. Daniel Brunskill allowed a quarterback hit and 2 hurries. Aaron Brewer allowed a hit and a hurry. And I already said what Jalen Duncan did. The run blocking was great, I thought. I thought the run blocking was good. But, man, that pass blocking, man, it was terrible. And they did not trend in the right direction. Now, this is probably I don't know if it's probably like a different style of pass rushers that you're seeing. But what I thought was unique about the Colts was like, they're really strong, but it also seems like it didn't matter what you were doing. They were attacking the right holes and loaded up the right side almost every time. Like their gap discipline seemed like just really good.
It's because
The Colts.
what I think about the Colts is that they don't have the TJ Watt Myles Garrett guy, but they don't have a single weakness. Like if you go down the line with Pay and Buckner, and then the two outside guys that I can't pronounce their names all the time, but like you all those, like there's not a weakness there, and so on any given play, if they were to focus on, hey, we're going to do a stunt on the right side, it worked. If we're going to go speed rush outside, it worked. If we're going to go, up the middle on a delayed blitz, it worked. And I think this leads to I don't know if you have much more to add on the offensive line, but I think it's tied into what my biggest
No, I
complaint
just
about.
think it goes to tell you that,
Yeah, they
guys,
suck.
he's a 6th-round rookie, and that's fine. Like, he can maybe find a place on the starting offensive line, maybe at right tackle or something. But guys, Jalen Duncan is not the left tackle of the future. It wasn't close to being that last week. It's not close to. It's even further away from this week.
Yeah.
It's not happening. Like, we gotta. I just want to reset everybody's mind on this. Please do not expect that Jalen Duncan is your solution at left tackle. Your solution is in the NFL draft this year.
Yeah. And Vrabel did say
Theoretically.
Vrabel was sort of like, you can always tell when you he was like, we're just scratching the surface, I think is the phrase he used with Jalen Duncan today, and then proceeded to point out a million things that he needs to do better. And I think it is a lot of upside. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of development. It doesn't mean he can't be a right tackle, let's say, next year or the year after. I think there's plenty of raw talent there to work with, which is kind of what his scouting report was. But the offensive line is this major issue across the board that we know of. Not every position, but by and large, is the biggest issue on the team. And I think that means that one of the things I really need to see from Levis, because Levis said after the game, this was his worst game. I think I don't know if he missed a ton of players like he did against Carolina, or maybe didn't see the pre-snap pressure the way he needed to do that against Pittsburgh, right? Like there's certain different games have different things where you see something he needs to work on. And to me, I've been saying protect your body is one of them, but like ball security's got to be another one. He's made these throws all season where he's kind of avoided the interception because of the ball was off his hands. The dude made some killer throws on Sunday. Like the dude made a bunch of really, really great throws. He also just a little bit more focus on the ball security when you're stepping up into the pocket. There's he recovered his own strip sack. One was a fumble and one was an interception. Both came off of pressure and deflections. Like just being more aware of the people around you. He takes so many big hits, immediately getting rid of the football, and that's not all his fault. But I think the ball security and taking care of your body are big ones that let's put it on the list of things he needs to keep working on. I didn't think it was a terrible game by him, but I am starting to see.
I thought it was his worst game.
I agree. I tend to agree.
I mean, I guess if you're looking at it from a pure passing perspective and not like a pure football playing perspective, like if you were looking at through the lens of Steve McNair, this was a pretty good game. But if you're looking at it through because Steve McNair was not a great passer, but he sure was a great damn football player, right? A great damn athlete, a great damn leader, gave his all the time.
Sure.
If you look at it through the lens of Ryan Tannehill, it's not a very good game. Like, I mean, a passing game. I mean, the shots to DeAndre Hopkins, we know one was a miscommunication, but there was one later on down the road where he didn't even give him a chance to try to do a get pass interference. I mean, he threw it way out of bounds. I mean,
completely inaccurate, and you could see Hopkins react to that.
Yeah, I mean,
Hopkins is like up the field, dude.
Yeah. The worst CPOE, so completion percentage over expected. It's the first time he's been negative, and he was negative 12.1. So he missed 12. There was 12.1% of completion percentage points that he left on the field on that game. And that was his worst. He hasn't had a negative CPOE. That's been one of the best things he's been at. He's completed passes over expected at a positive rate every week. But this was his worst week. Now, it's one of his best weeks for EPA. Is one of his best weeks for success rate. But he left a lot of plays on the table, and that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable. That's okay to say. I'm not saying give up on Will Levis. He would even tell you that it was his worst game, and I'm sure he still felt that way after he went and watched the game. I'm going to get into this first half, second half, but there's a lot that's in an article. There's just a lot that he still has to work on. But that's expected. This is a better rookie season in my mind than what I saw from Josh Allen. If you want to look at Josh Allen's rookie season, he was not very good. Will Levis is better than Josh Allen's rookie season. Does not mean that Will Levis is going to be better than Josh Allen, but that should give you some hope that as far as rookie seasons go, he's got a lot of good things working in his favor that will be able to be improved upon in 2024.
Ed Henry says Jordan Love or Will Levis, Braden, and I still think Will Levis has as much physical upside and talent as Jordan Love. I think Love misses some throws still. He's been in the league for 3 years preparing for this. They both have sort of like the Packers offensive line is probably slightly better, but it's not all that great. Their running back
slightly better. I mean, like, I don't know if it's slightly better. It's got to be
but like
better
the receiving, like DeAndre Hopkins would be the best player on either team as far as receiving core goes. I think it's hard to do recency bias because I think Matt LaFleur called the best game of his entire career as a Packers
It was a
coach.
tremendous game.
And I think that Jordan Love played the best first half I've ever
these
seen.
Last 3 or 4 weeks, Jordan Love has.
Right.
I mean, I think it was he's got 3 or 4 games now with the highest passing totals since Aaron Rodgers at some point during his career.
Yeah.
Yardage wise, he's being very good, quick, decisive. Matt LaFleur, you're right, is calling good games, which is going to lead me into my column tomorrow.
And I want to ask you about that because the Packers are the youngest offense in the NFL, and all of their receivers and are all like first and second year players.
None of 3 of my like favorite wide receivers were in that game last night.
None of whom were drafted in the first round, by the way. Not one of them were drafted in the first round. You've got Wicks, Heath, Reed, Watson, like Dobbs, all down the list of like 2nd through 6th round picks. They're all late picks, and they're not all going to be good, but some of them are going to hit and be very good. And so the Titans could take a page. The Titans could take a page out of that book for sure. So that it sounds like you want me to ask you about Tim Kelly. Because I want to say
that's gonna be for tomorrow because okay. There's a lot that I have not unpacked data wise with Tim Kelly yet, so I don't want to talk about Tim Kelly, but I will say that there seems to be some kind of discrepancy in the second half play calling versus what works in the first half. But I also, when I was kind of looking at it last night before this game got loaded up and everything with data and all that kind of stuff, the second half actually is trending better in some of the efficiency metrics. So I don't want to get into it right now. And there's also things I want to talk about, like with slants and dropbacks and all this stuff. I'm just not ready to talk about. I do want to say this. Tajay Spears is the real deal. Tajay Spears could be your lead running back while Derrick Henry is recovering. Do not play Derrick Henry this week.
I tend to agree with that. Shrike says this. Levis doesn't see the underneath stuff until the last second. He wants the big ball so much he refuses to move on from it until he's getting hit. That could be a part of what you're talking about, looking into some of the routes that are working. I will say this about Tim Kelly. They schemed up the game-winning drive when they needed it most. And Levis executed the game-winning drive when they needed it most. Tajay Spears, big part of the game-winning drive when they needed it most. My only thing with Spears, the dude, so there are certain players that know how to fall really, really well. And that means avoiding hits. It means knowing how to sort of contort your body to get out of the way and still get tackled, but still gain yards. And there are guys who just I watched Tajay Spears play, and I he is such a hard ass runner, and it's so hard to tackle, but he takes so many big hits. And hopefully that's something he learns to sort of maybe avoid a few of those moving forward, because that even in the passing game, which wasn't his fault 2 weeks ago when Levis kind of hung him out to dry, he just takes a lot of shots, and some of those are because he can't be tackled. And so I want him to be I don't know what the right phraseology is. Be careful with your body, protect yourself, but while not changing any of your aggression. It's hard to do that. But Robert Griffin is the worst faller I've ever seen in my life. Emmitt Smith might be one of the best fallers I've ever seen in my entire life. LaDainian Tomlinson, one of the best fallers ever. Never saw those guys take big hits. Go watch some Emmitt Smith and LaDainian Tomlinson film. That's what I hope for Tajay. Otherwise, I agree. I think he's clearly capable of being a 15 to 25 touchback per game. So, okay.
Looks good.
Anything else you want to add? Chig, back-to-back best 2 games of the season, more involved in the offense. Are you buying that? Is that a trend, or is that just Carolina and the Colts at home? What do you make of that?
I don't know. I mean, the Colts aren't no slouch in the linebacker department and in coverage and stuff. So I guess you kind of have to say, you put it together 3 good games. I'm here for you. I'm here for the redemption tour.
So just keep it going. Second half of season,
Yeah,
which is
just keep it
about
going.
where he.
Oh, I got something I want to say.
Oh, all right.
How dare these freaking idiots healthy scratch Kyle Phillips for a Traylon Burks who's going to only play like 9 snaps, 10 snaps? That was your game plan? Like, you could just had him sit on the sidelines. With those 10 snaps, Kyle Phillips could probably provide you more. And you play Nick Westbrook-Ikine 60-something snaps. Chris Moore had a bunch of snaps. Of course, DeAndre Hopkins was 60-something snaps. But you keep Kyle Phillips on the sideline, who is a reliable pass catcher. That could have been a difference in the game, too. I know people probably are thinking that, well, that's pretty extreme. But you talk about some of these, first downs that Kyle Phillips tends to find his way to, some of these drive extenders that he does. He's a reliable target that gets open. He has one of the best separations on this team as far as when he is targeted. He is open by a wide margin. And these idiots are too scared of Kenny Moore to put him in. And they're like, oh, we got to make sure Traylon Burks gets non-snaps because he does a lot with them. He went 0 for 0. He would have done that with 30 snaps more than likely.
Well,
put it in Kyle Phillips, play Kyle Phillips.
Colton Dowell also active, but exclusively for special teams. It's not necessarily a 1-for-1 swap. It could be like, hey, we wanted an extra DB or we wanted an extra this. It's not necessarily just Dowell or Burks that took his spot, theoretically.
Eldon's right. Shrike 113, he says they went in knowing they would only use 3 wide receivers, and I think they're idiots. I think that's stupid.
Well,
I think that's one of the stupidest things they've done all damn year was healthy scratch Kyle Phillips, who's been a reliable target for your young quarterback. Makes no damn sense.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming we'll get a question about that this week and find out if there's more to the story or if it's more of a matchup thing or, again, I know people see like Dow active, Phillips not, and think that was the decision, and it's not that simple. Sometimes
I feel like it was more Burks than Phillips at this point. I mean, you didn't have to play Burks his first game back from concussion if you're playing. Their game plan, it was planned that they were only going to really use 3 wide receivers, and Kyle Phillips was not one of those wide receivers, and that's foolish.
Okay. Cover Michael Pittman with Christian Fulton and play Kyle Phillips. 2 bad coaching decisions. All right. The committee, college football here. We'll wrap up. Sinkers Beverages, Kingsley Group, of course, are 2 great and amazing local sponsors. I don't know if they got it right, but it's not because Alabama or Texas. So
I think you got to I would like to say, after watching the Oregon-Washington game, I got to eat my words. I think Washington can compete. And I think Washington's one of the best teams, and they may even be a better team than Michigan.
I think there's a lot of teams that might be better than Michigan, but they had to get in. They had to put them in, just like
that's kind of my feeling about Florida State too. Was like there's like a lot of teams better than Florida State.
Not without their superstar quarterback, yes.
There are a lot of teams with Jordan Travis as their quarterback that are better than Florida State.
Okay, but not undefeated conference champions, which I don't love as the argument, but that is the argument. And if Jordan Travis was healthy, they would have been put in the playoff. So I think what they had to do. Number one thing you need to remember about this is, I personally think Georgia's the best team that was left out. I know Florida State fans think they're the best team that was left out. I think Ohio State fans don't really have an argument, but pretty damn good football team that got left out that largely accomplished.
They're better than Florida State.
I think they're also. I agree with you on that. So I think there's like the committee, this is for the first time ever in 10 years and the last time ever that the committee was not looking for a reason to put you in, but looking for a reason to keep you out. And those are two, it's a very subtle difference, but it is what they had to do. Ohio State didn't win its division, compete for a championship. They got left out. Georgia lost to Alabama. Alabama gets in, so therefore Georgia didn't win a championship. They are left out, even though I think that's stupid and just blindly dumb football decision-making. Florida State lost its best player, and their offense went into the toilet the last 2 games, where they averaged less than 4 yards per play. And in a year where all 7 teams deserve to be in, you had to find a reason to put somebody out. And Jordan Travis not playing, it says in their bylaws, key missing players is a part of the evaluation process. It says it in the rules. So Florida State fans,
the schedule,
and you also hit. That's exactly right. You can't be. I would say this also about if Jalen Milroe had gotten hurt against Auburn. I would say the same thing about Alabama. If J.J. McCarthy was out for Michigan, I'd say the same thing about Michigan. You can't have the worst strength of schedule and lose your star quarterback, and in a year like this, expect to get into the playoffs. So it's a bummer. It sucks. Lost in all the chaos is that we got what could be 2 very good football games in the playoff. Of course, Michigan won,
Hey,
Washington 2,
Alabama's
Texas
probably
3.
going to smoke Michigan. I
I
would
got
assume that Alabama's going to smoke Michigan.
I
I am
got Alabama
enthralled
2
with,
I got Alabama 2.5 right away.
yeah. Yeah, I am enthralled
Right away.
by the Texas-Washington matchup. Like, I think that could be one of the best football games that we have watched all year, and I'm kind of rooting. I'm rooting for Washington from like a state of. I really like Michael Penix. I really like Roma Dunze. I really love watching him play every week. But I'm also kind of rooting for Texas because I'm like, man, it sure would be fun to have an Alabama versus Texas rematch in the national championship game. That would be so
Uh,
amazing. I think this is.
I think you're
I
going to get
think
it.
you got 3 of the 4 best teams, and I think
I
only
agree.
Michigan. You got to let Michigan in because they're undefeated. They have a good strength of schedule. They beat Ohio State. They have been consistent all year and won the Big Ten. Like they have to kind of be in, but I'm kind of with you. I think they're the 5th, maybe 6th. I think they're the 5th best team in the nation. I would put Georgia as the top 4 with these other 3 teams.
So I might go. So my issue with Washington is they have by far the worst of the 7 teams we're talking about here. Washington has by far the worst unit. Defensively, they are the worst defense, worse than any of the offenses or the defenses. So they have the worst unit. Now they're healthier in that championship game against Oregon than they had been all year, which is an important note and an important context. I also my issue with Washington is much like TCU last year. Teams that don't have elite talent and are barely surviving as the season goes along throughout the course of the most of the season, that's generally a thing that gets exposed in the playoff. And while Washington is completely deserving and totally worthy of being where they are, and congratulations, they're great quarterback, great receiving core, brilliantly called football game against Oregon to attack them on the edge, running the football. Like everything was great about that.
Even the defense played really well that game.
They are a worthy team. They are absolutely, again, all 7 of these teams are worthy in my opinion. So if your team got left out, you deserve to be pissed. If your team got in, you deserve to be in. And that's a weird place for us to be, and that's why we're going to 12. But if you ask me who the best 4 football teams are, and it's not, Jason, it's not arbitrary. It is based on every piece of data we have collected over the course of the season. We watched 13 games of Bama and Georgia and Oregon and Washington and Michigan and 12 of Ohio State and 13 of Texas and 13 of Florida State, and 3 had to be left out and 4 had to go in. That's just the math of it. If you're asking me,
conference championships won, strength of schedule, head-to-head competition, comparative outcomes of common opponents without incenting margin of victory, and other relevant factors such as unavailability of key players and coaches that may have affected a team's performance during the season or likely will affect its postseason performance.
Now that's a lot of words to ultimately say what's your job, and their job is to put the best 4 teams. The job has never been best most deserving. The job has never been best resume. The job has always been the best 4 teams. I would argue all of those things are the same. Certain teams certain teams have different strengths on their resume and weaknesses on their resume than others. Washington, lots of wins over a top 12 schedule, but not very dominant and not a very good defense, but the best offense. Right, so their resume, everybody's resume is kind of different. Which team is the most improved team and has one of the most unstoppable quarterbacks and beat the number 1 team in the nation, has the most wins over the top 20? Alabama. Like, so again, my best 4 teams, who I think the best 4 teams in college football are this season, are Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Texas. Those are the 4 best teams, in my opinion, and I feel pretty calm about it. Like I asked some people in Vegas, what would Georgia be against everybody else? And 2.5 touchdown favorite over Florida State. They'd be a heavy favorite over Texas. They'd be an even heavier
we'll
favorite.
actually see that. Like,
well, that's not a real
Florida
game.
State, here's your hey Florida State, here's your consolation prize. Like,
yeah.
Hey, you didn't we didn't put you in even though you won your conference championship. But here's Georgia.
The idea that a Jordan Travis-less Florida State is better than Georgia is fucking comical. And I lost money on that because I had money on Florida State to make the playoff. I lost money on that statement. But it's comical if you think that Georgia, the clear number 1 team in the entire country, loses to Alabama by 3 points in a neutral site matchup, and all of a sudden they are the 6th best team in America. Get the fuck out of here. That's absolutely ridiculous. They are clearly one of the 4 best teams. My problem is I don't know who you leave out. There's only 4 spots. And it was easy. Here's the other thing you have to consider if you're a fan of these teams. The committee is going to do the thing that kind of makes the most sense in the press conference when they have to explain it. It's easy to explain Ohio State, right? Didn't win their division, didn't play in the conference championship, didn't play a tough enough schedule, whatever. Easy to explain Florida State. Didn't have their superstar quarterback. That's part of our criteria. Their offense looked like dog shit the last 2 weeks. Easy to explain. You have to explain more if you put them in, right? You got to explain more. Georgia, you got to explain. You can say, look, they didn't win their conference championship. They had a playoff game against Alabama. They lost. They had their chance. They lost. I disagree with that, but that's their explanation. They had easy explanations. Well, if Texas is in, that puts Alabama at 4. Alabama's the conference champ. Texas is the champ. Washington's undefeated. Michigan's undefeated. Like, it's easy to explain those 4. And it's why
it felt so clear that night that, like, to me, it felt so clear. I thought that the order was right. I thought it was going to be Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama in that order. And that was the right order because it made the most sense from a logical standpoint. Taking emotion out of it, it made the most sense. And I think that when you look at it logically, that typically logic and business and the way to do things, usually it's like the most, what's that? The most
Occam's razor, the most
answer.
Obvious. Yeah, Occam's razor,
yeah, the most obvious answer is the right answer. This was the most obvious answer, I felt like. And then you see Kirk Herbstreit put up those 4 helmets right behind him. And I'm like, okay, well, we're good. Alabama's in.
It's funny. Like, I struggled Saturday night after a couple glasses of whiskey, just kind of doing all the machinations in my head. Like, oh, I think they're clearly going to put Ohio State at 7. They're going to put Michigan at 1. Okay, they're going to put Washington at 2, and you sort of kind of start to work through it. And the one that was the easiest to explain and the easiest to predict is where and again, I think I tweeted it out like 20 minutes before. I said it's going to be Michigan 1, Washington 2, Texas 3, Alabama 4. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did. In my head, Georgia is better than Washington, but that is extremely difficult to explain to the public, to the fans, to the teams. You're already leaving one undefeated champion out. It would be extremely hard to explain it other than the fact that fucking Georgia would beat their ass. But other than that, it's about what they can explain. And frankly, I think Washington, Texas is a really good football game. I think Washington, Georgia would not have been. And I think Alabama, Michigan is going to be I think there's a part of me that really thinks Michigan is going to play extremely well in that game. I think Michigan's going to play. 3 years
JJ McCarthy has not looked very good these last few weeks. Now, listen, Jalen Milroe these last games has made some questionable calls too, and we have plenty of time to do
lots of time
show. But
35 days.
Let me say this. I think when it's all said and done, you're looking at the best 4 teams by various metrics when you look at everything that it's supposed to take into account. I think you got the 4 best teams.
Close enough.
I think Georgia's the 5th best team. And I think it's almost like a 4B scenario when you really talk about it. And but the thing is, to me, is like Alabama, and I think Eldon said it right. Alabama only won by 3, but man, they sure felt like they were dominating Georgia that whole damn game. And I was nervous. The fan in me got nervous, but like I'm also thinking, I don't know. Alabama's just can do whatever it feels like they want. More Williams touches, please, as we go forward. I've been saying that since the USF game. But we've talked about how Alabama's changed. I agree that Texas has gotten better as the year goes on. Washington has got better in certain areas, but they've been kind of the same team they've been all year. Same with Michigan. So like I at the end of the day, I get that it sucks for the kids. Yep. They ain't my kids. I didn't pay for them to get tuition. They're not my football team. Fuck them kids.
Well, so Jason says, if you look at the data and you just say, I think, to make the decision, wins and losses, like here's why aren't people fighting for, and I say this a lot in my college football content, so maybe I haven't fully fleshed it out on this show and we got to move on here. But Jason, like my issue is like, why is nobody fighting for Liberty to be in the playoff? And it's because it's very easy for our brains to look at Liberty's conference schedule and say, oh, that's not worthy. I think you do the same thing. It's you look at a schedule and you look at how dominant a team is. You look at the talent, you look at the wins, the losses, the resume, the strengths, the weaknesses. Like I you look at all that stuff and because they are Because we are in a sport where no schedule is created equally, because we are organized around geography 100 years ago. The Pac-12 and the SEC formed 100 years ago based on geography. You can't tell me that those schedules are then automatically the same and that the 0 is better than the 1. You can't tell me that the 0 is automatically better than the 1 without bringing in a whole shit ton of context, because these schedules are based on geography. It's not like the NFL. The NFL schedules are all based on equality. In college football, it's based on geography. And so it's just the way it is. You're never going to have an even scheduling model in college football until there's a 50-team breakaway and everybody plays a 12-team Power 5 schedule, and it's the SEC versus the Big Ten every single year, and they have their own commissioner and their own playoff, and then all the schedules will be basically even, and then we can put teams in based on record. You cannot put a team in based on record. It doesn't work in college football because the schedules are so different. That's all. It's a very nuanced understanding of the game. But Washington played their schedule based on a 1937 forming of the Pac-6. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody knows that. Okay, I think it's gonna be great. I think it's actually gonna give us two really good games. Lost in all the chaos is where we're gonna be at. We'll be back on Thursday to preview, of course, the big stuff coming up this weekend. We're gonna have a good time. Make sure you check out F Word, Stack in the Inbox, Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, all the great stuff from across the 440 Sports Network as well. Zach, thanks for hanging out, man. Always a pleasure. Good to see you, buddy. We'll talk on Thursday. My name is Braden Gall. Thanks for listening. This has been a football show.